Hi, this is Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games and we like the devices that bring them to us. Now, I picked up some extra Joy-Cons used for my Nintendo Switch OLED model. However, because I picked them up used, they do have a couple of little issues with them, including possibly needing the joysticks to be replaced, and the buttons are a little bit on the sticky end. So I decided I wanted to try to open these Joy-Cons up and re-shell them. So I picked up a couple of sets of Joy-Con shells, and that's what this video is about here. We're going to do a tutorial on how to replace those shells and how to test to see if the replacement joysticks were worth buying. Now, this process is not for the faint of heart. In fact, I feel like this is one of the hardest teardown and replacement videos that I've ever had to do, and so I've been procrastinating a bit on actually going through this process. But now that I've done it, I actually feel a lot more confident in being able to do a Joy-Con swap in the future. And we're going to replace the 4 buttons on the left Joy-Con with a proper D-pad as well, which is something I'm really looking forward to. So let's jump in and let's get to work. Alright, so let's start with tools that we're going to need. We're going to start with the 2 Joy-Cons that we're going to replace here. And I actually recommend that you have an iFixit kit handy, because we're going to use a couple of different screwdriver bits for this. The first one being a Y0 tri-wing bit, and this is going to allow us to take the shells off. And then we're also going to use a PH0 Phillips head kit, because this is what's going to allow us to take the screws out when we get into the actual insides of the unit. We also need a set of angled tweezers, and let's get a guitar pick and a sponger from the iFixit kit as well, because we are going to need to do a little bit of prying. And the Joy-Con shells that I'm using are from Extreme Rate, so I purchased red ones here to go with the 2 red Joy-Cons that I purchased used. And one thing I'm really looking forward to, as I mentioned earlier, is I'm really looking forward to putting a proper D-pad on this set of Joy-Cons once I swap out the shells. Now, another nice thing about the Extreme Rate set is that you can also get a set of colored buttons if that's your thing. I'm just going to use the ones that are on my original controllers. And in case you're like me and you drop or lose parts on the floor, they give you a ton of extra screws and springs and whatever else you might need in order to make this a successful swap. Okay, let's get into our chill teardown music here, and let's start to take this left Joy-Con apart. So we're going to start with our Y0 screwdriver, and we're going to take off the 4 screws on the back. If you find that you're struggling with this, you can go down to a Y00. I just tried to go with the bigger size to not strip the screws. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and take your guitar pick and use that to pry open the back of the Joy-Con. Now we're going to switch to our Phillips head bit, and we're going to use that to remove a single screw on the back plate of the Joy-Con, and we can take that piece of plastic away and take the release button away as well. And let's start to slowly pry this battery off. It might have some adhesive, which is why you are going to need your sponger. and then we'll very carefully disconnect the battery from its connector. And once we do that, we can set the battery aside as well. Now the battery bay is held on by 3 screws. We can go ahead and remove those, and we can take the battery bay out. Just be very careful, because as you remove the battery bay, you're going to notice that the R2 button is held on by a ribbon cable to the motherboard. And it's a longer ribbon cable on the left Joy-Con, but we could go ahead and remove that. And then let's remove the vibration motor as well. Now that you may have to wiggle a little bit, as there is some double-sided tape holding that in place. So even though I'm speeding up this video, I advise you to go very slow when taking this out. Now we can go ahead and remove the minus sign, which is held in place by a ribbon cable and 3 screws at the top. And this is all one piece, so once you take out the 3 screws, this should pop right out. The joystick is held in place by a ribbon cable as well as 2 screws, so let's go ahead and take that out next. Now we can remove the screws holding the motherboard in place, and we can remove the motherboard. We don't need to detach the light indicator on the end of the unit. Now let's go ahead and remove the remaining buttons, and we're gonna go ahead and carefully remove this dust cover as well, because we're going to need to transfer that to the new Joy-Con shell. Now let's go ahead and put the new D-pad in, as well as the old screenshot and minus buttons, and we could start putting this back together. Let's start by screwing the motherboard back into place. And now let's put the replacement joystick, screw that back into place, and put the ribbon cable back in. Now let's put the minus button back. Then we can put the vibration motor back. Then put the L1 button back into place. Now let's carefully grab the battery cover, and we're going to pry off the R2 button just by lifting up and unclipping with our thumb and index finger. There are two springs here that like to go flying. We're going to carefully set those aside, and then we're going to unscrew the daughter board. Then we can grab the next replacement battery cover, and we could screw the daughter board right back in with that single screw. Now, by far the hardest part of the whole process, we need to put the two springs back into place, and then we need to seat the R2 button on top and clip it in. And these springs are, well, springy. They will move and they will make things very difficult. And this process might take you a little bit of time. But once you get it aligned perfectly, you can test to make sure the R2 button has the appropriate level of clickiness. And then you can go ahead and attach the R2 ribbon cable back into the motherboard, and we could screw this battery cover back in place. Let's go ahead and place the battery back in the bay and plug it back in. And now let's take the new back plate, put the release button back in, and then we can go ahead and seat the back plate in place and use that one solitary screw to screw it back into the Joy-Con. Everything looks good here, so let's close it up and let's put the 4 screws back in to seal the deal. Now the right Joy-Con will undergo a similar procedure, but there are slightly different components on this side of the controller, so there are going to be a few extra steps involved as a result. For example, in addition to moving the battery, you are also going to have to remove a Wi-Fi antenna. So what I recommend you do is actually remove the vibration motor first, because then you'll have easier access to the plug that keeps the Wi-Fi antenna attached to the motherboard. Then we can disconnect the battery housing, the joystick, and the motherboard similarly to how we did with the left Joy-Con. However, the ribbon cable for the R2 button is much shorter this time around and much harder to get out and put back in. Another complication here is that in addition to the motherboard, you also have to take out the IR sensor and the amiibo reader. The amiibo reader is held on by a ribbon cable you'll have to remove, and everything is kind of adhered down, so you may need to use your spudger to loosen up that adhesive. And then you can go ahead and take the buttons out, as well as the amiibo touch point and the dust cover. Alright, let's start to put this Joy-Con back together. Let's start with the dust cover as well as the face buttons. We just need to make sure that we put everything in the right place. And we also are going to put the home button in, and then we can reattach the amiibo reader, IR sensor, and motherboard. Just be very careful with this whole process and take it slow. Here's our replacement joystick. We'll go ahead and we will screw that in place and reattach that ribbon cable. Now let's replace the R1 button. Again, these springs are a little troublesome, so you may have to try a couple of different times. Now it's time to swap out the battery casing, same as before. Again, those screws and that R2 button is going to give you a bit of a hard time, so you are going to have to be patient. Reattaching the R2 button ribbon cable to the motherboard is going to be much harder this time around because it is a much shorter ribbon cable, so you will have to awkwardly hold the battery casing and use your tweezers to continue trying to put that ribbon cable back in place without pinching it or breaking it. Just take it slow, take breaks if you're starting to get frustrated, and you will get it. It's just going to take you a little bit of time. And then you can go ahead and you can screw the battery housing back in once everything is seated in place. Now let's reattach the Wi-Fi antenna, the vibration motor, and the battery. Now let's go ahead and replace the back shell that's just held on by one screw, and you're going to go ahead and swap out the release button as well. Alright, let's go ahead and seal this Joy-Con up as well, and now we can start testing. Unfortunately, right off the bat, I had some severe issues with the right Joy-Con. I wasn't able to calibrate it, and it was definitely drifting to the right. Once I finally was able to get to a screen where I can see what the calibration was like, the Joy-Con just shifted all the way to the right, and there was really nothing I could do about it, no matter how hard I tried. And so ultimately what I had to do was I needed to open up the Joy-Con and replace the old joystick. And once I was able to do that, I didn't run into any more issues. Everything seemed to calibrate just fine. And unfortunately, only one of the joysticks in the 4-pack I had purchased actually worked, so I ended up having to send them back. So I'm not going to recommend which ones I purchased because they didn't work except for one out of the box, and that was really unfortunate. However, all said and done, everything seems to be working fine with this Joy-Con shell replacement. So here is a little bit of gameplay just to show you that everything is working. And one last thing I wanted to show you is you can actually take your Joy-Cons and connect them to your Windows device if you have a Bluetooth connection. And you can use this program called Joy-Con Toolkit. I'll leave a link in the description. And you can actually back up the controller's profile. And that may take a little bit of time. But once you've done that, you can actually go in and not just change the shell of the physical outside of the Joy-Con, but you can actually change it on the software end too. So I'm going to go into body and buttons color, and you could see the default body is of the neon red, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to go up to these retail color sets, and I'm going to change it to the darker red. And then from there, we can go ahead and click OK, and we can update the controller. And so once I click right colors, it's going to give me a quick warning. And then once I hit yes here, it's going to send that color to the controller itself. And then when I go ahead and plug the Joy-Con into my Switch, if we actually go into the controllers tab, you're going to see that not only did I change the hardware color, but I changed the software color on the device itself. And that's really cool because now the shell replacement that I did is reflected in the software as well. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you done a Joy-Con swap in the past, and did it go well? And is this something that you might consider doing in the future if you haven't done it yet? Full disclosure, this was not easy, but the more I did it, the more comfortable I got with going through the process. And if you have any questions and you want to talk about this further, you could find me in the Steam Machine Discord channel. Link will be in the video description. Team Retrogue is part of the Steam Machine production, so definitely go check them out. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And if this video was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.